Yeah, you know what? You're really taking the romance out of it when you just call it my plant control thingy. Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all new Cross and Streams. As always, I am your host, the real Gino Reynolds, and today we're going to be continuing our look at the DC Universe's Harley Quinn series, this time episode 12 entitled Devil's Snare. I will warn you, there's probably going to be some spoilers in this episode. I do want to talk about some of the stuff that's happened, but it's very spoiler heavy. I did really like this episode a lot, even though some bad things happened to some of our characters. When we last left off, our heroes were battling the mutated plants that Scarecrow had created by modifying Poison Ivy's pheromones. And we find out that Poison Ivy cannot control these plants. So they're in trouble. There is a death, a quote unquote death, at the beginning or near the beginning of the episode, and you pretty much know that the character is faking, and it's actually still pretty funny. We then go to Jim Gordon, who he says, I know how to handle this, and Batman's like, no, don't use the tanks. Apparently taxpayers of Gotham paid for a couple of tanks, and Jim Gordon really wants to use them. Batman's like, no, innocent people will get hurt. Scarecrow is using fear toxin to make people run to the city instead of away from it, and some of them will end up in the park and get killed. But he says the Justice League is on the way. So we go back to our quote-unquote heroes, and the Justice League show up. And they start dispatching the monster trees. But then after Harley thanks them, she's like, we'll handle it from here. They start to capture Harley's team, and Harley's like, we didn't do this. And they're like, yeah, you have Poison Ivy and plants, you know. But after Superman threatens and attempts to send them to the negative zone, Poison Ivy gets the bright idea of using Wonder Woman's lasso of truth to get the truth out of her about did she do this, and a lot of other things that she probably didn't want to admit. So they let Harley's team go, but then we find out at least one of the people that is really behind this plot. The Queen of Fables shows back up and traps the Justice League in the Book of Fables. So the Justice League, minus Batman, who is off fighting Scarecrow, the Justice League are captured. Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, Superman, they're all captured now. And Harley is like, hey, it's a good thing we didn't kill you. And the Queen of Fables uses yet another fable to get Harley and her team out of the way for now. She's supposed to take care of them, as we find out later, but she tries to take care of them in a dramatic kind of way that ends up not working. She sends them up Jack's Beanstalk, where they have to face off against the Giant. We then see, or this is where this episode kind of becomes a Poison Ivy episode, and I was afraid of why. Because a lot of times when you really start focusing on a character, something bad is going to happen to that character, and I'm like, this show isn't going to do that, right? Poison Ivy's like, we got to get off this cloud, and so she borrows Cy Borgman's phone, which is in his leg, and she calls her man, the Kite Man. And Harley's like, you know his number? And she ends up having to admit later in the episode that, yes, I'm dating Kite Man. I don't know if I'm in love. She's like, I love him. I don't know if I'm in love with him. She has a little bit of commitment issues. Of course, Kite Man is totally in love with her. But Kite Man comes and saves the day. He, you all of a sudden see the giant get blinded. It's a Cyclops giant. And he goes, I blinded it with hot sauce I found in my pocket. And it was pretty funny. And then he helps every one of them get down. But, of course, they're all a little too heavy. And, then they have to kind of improvise on how they're going to land safely. But it was pretty cool seeing Kite Man get to be the hero. So all of a sudden, in rolls in Jim Gordon in his tanks, or at least one of his tanks. But Harley ends up commissioning it or commandeering it. So what was great was, I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but Harley pops out of the tank and she's wearing a helmet, and Poison Ivy comments on how good she looked popping out of that tank. And the first thing I thought when I saw her pop out of that tank was, wasn't Lori Petty kind of a Harley type character on Gotham? Thinking, man, Lori Petty would have been a great Harley Quinn back in the day. I thought that would have been kind of cool, but it was just kind of a nice tank girl comparison. So Harley is like, you know what? We're going to go blow up the Legion of Doom headquarters. They're behind this. We gotta stop them. So they go to the Legion of Doom headquarters and they're going to blow it up. But all of a sudden it blows itself up, and they make a comment about invisible missiles. But it turns out that an idea that was presented earlier in an earlier episode comes into play. The Joker's Tower. The one that Harley kind of helped him design right as she became a member of the Legion of Doom. And she's like, at least he used my ideas. But it turns out that it's not the Legion of Doom behind it. It was Scarecrow, the Queen of Fables, and Joker. The Joker basically says the Legion of Doom has outlived its usefulness and I'm going to run things. So he ends up talking with the Queen of Fables, and he's like, I thought I told you to take care of them. She's like, I tried to do it dramatically. He's like, why are they still alive? So she goes after them again, and she ends up sicking the big bad wolf dressed up in grandma's clothing after them, which leads to a pretty funny Clayface moment. While that's happening, Kite Man and Poison Ivy are trying to find a way to stop the plants, where Poison Ivy ends up drinking some of this fluid that Scarecrow had made, and it turns her big. She becomes as big as the trees, and she battles them and takes out the plants, even though she hates it because she's fighting plants, but she's just like, you know what? They're like, my friends are important. I got to stop them. There has to be exceptions. So Harley has to deal with the Grandma Wolf, and but you see the Grandma Wolf walk up to the Queen of Fables, and it looks like the wolf was successful, and she's like, did you get me Harley's head? And the wolf opens its mouth, and there's Harley's head, but then Harley pops up and is just like, surprise, and busts out of the wolf. And I go, what happens next? The way I reacted and what the character said next, it was funny because it was the exact same thing. Harley bada swings and knocks the Queen of Fables head off, and I go, O-S. Out loud. I was watching it at work, and I said, O-S. I started laughing, and then as the head's laying on the ground, Wanda Sykes, the Queen of Fables, is like, O-S. And I thought that was pretty funny. So they beat the Queen of Fables, and so then they meet up with Poison Ivy, who's wasting the bad guys, and Poison Ivy and Harley have a little bit of heart-to-heart, and I'm like, oh god, they're gonna do this, aren't they? All of a sudden, big freaking spear goes through Poison Ivy, big Poison Ivy, and she falls to the ground and shrinks. And at least to our knowledge, at the end of this episode, Poison Ivy is killed off. I didn't think they would do that in this show. That being said, the last episode, it's going to be Harley versus the Joker. And of course, Harley is going to be peeved. And her friend is dead. Her best friend is dead, at least as far as we know. Her best friend is dead, and she's going to be going after the Joker. And that's how, again, we get left off with another cliffhanger. They're all mourning Poison Ivy in front of the Joker's tower, and the Joker is laughing. So you just know that the last episode of the season, it's going to be Harley versus the Joker. I really dug this episode a lot. There was some decent character development, some decent humor. King Shark gets to drop a line saying basically, he goes, people have always wondered what would happen if a wolf took on a shark, and it's like the shark would win. You see him spit out some of the wolf's bones. There was some decent humor, some great heart-to-heart between Harley and Ivy. Again, being that this was a very heavy Ivy episode, I had this bad feeling they were going to kill her off, and I was really surprised that they did. Kite Man, who knows how he's going to react, because he's really broken up about it, because while he's talking to Poison Ivy, he does tell her, I love you, and he does ask her to marry him. She's like, I don't know, and he's like, it wasn't a no. So there's a lot of good, decent character development in this. It definitely sets up a finale of Harley versus the Joker, and Harley has tons of motivation to kill the Joker, because the Joker took her best friend. This guy who she was obsessed with for years took her best friend, and now she's going to be going after him, and I can't wait till next week. That's going to be all for this edition of Crossing Streams. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe to the Real Gino YouTube channel, like this video. If you have anything to say about the Harley Quinn series on the DC Universe, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Till next time, I'm your host, the Real Gino, Gino Reynolds. See you later, puddins.